Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time looking at this critical area of the business case. That is to quantify the project payoff using one of the commonly used financial measures. Um, I'm going to talk about ROI, payback period, MPV, and IRR briefly in the next few slides. And for those of you who haven't taken finance or are not very good at the financial analysis, which you will after this whole curriculum. You can use a simpler one such as return on investment, which doesn't really take much to do, and you just have to set it up as I show you in the next slide. But the important thing is to keep in mind that a financial analysis is very important because ultimately the way to judge whether a project is useful or is worth doing or not is based on whether it provides return, and you have to use the financial analysis to show that the return is viable. So to employ any of the financial analysis, you first have to set it up. And now that you have the costs and benefits data, then it's really not that hard to set it up. So initially, you have to make assumption of what the system lifetime is. So the lifetime of a system includes not only the development cycle, which is the project time frame. So it may take 6 months, it may take a year, it may take 2 years to develop and implement this project, implement this system. But after the system is implemented, the system is running. So that's when the benefits are being accrued, and but at the same time, you may still have to maintain the system and update the system, so there may still be costs associated with it. And then you know that so if you set it up like here, so this is more like a simple table in Excel. So you have to set it up the year. So I always start with year zero. That's before the project starts, and then let's say the system lifetime is n, or if give it a number, let's say 5. Then you put up the benefits. So each year, what do you receive benefits of that year. So that's a this the subscript. So B0 represents the benefits of the zeroth year, which of course it should be zero because you shouldn't get any benefits out of this system before it's implemented, right? And then B1 is the benefit after year one, B2 is benefit after year two, and so on. The cost is the same thing. C0 is the represents the initial cost even before the project starts. And then when you implement a project in the first year, it's going to cost you certain things. Let's say that if the project is completed in the second year, you have to maintain the project, or there's licensing fee, and that becomes C2 and C3 and so on. Okay, so if you look at the net benefits on a yearly basis, so that is BI minus CI. So in year I, the net benefit is BI minus CI. Okay, so if you want to get get an idea of how you get the benefits, then that's just simple calculation. Just remember that all of the BI, all of the B's and C's are assumptions, are estimates. So you because these are all future numbers, then you have to make projections based on your best guess or best assumptions and all of the research that you can find. But you have to be able to identify the numbers, create all the projections and put it into a table like this. So get yourself ready for calculations. So ROI is the first financial measure that I want to talk about here, and it's a universally acceptable one, and it's very easy to calculate. If you haven't taken finance or if you're uncomfortable using more complicated financial measures, ROI is a good one to use. ROI stands for return on investment, so that's exactly what it is. So what is a return over investment? So you know that's a ratio. Most of the time, we like to use ratios to represent to show the as a conclusive numbers to show others. Why ratio is important? Because we want to see the effect over certain base. And so for instance, if you say that the total benefits of the total net benefits is $1 million, that sounds like a large number. But if the total investment is 10 billion and then you only get $1 million worth of return out of it, then that's actually that may not be something worth doing. But if your total investment is 10 million and then you get 1 million out of it, then the 10% return, that sounds pretty respectable. So that's why we always like to go with a ratio or a percentage. So whenever you think of a ratio, then you have to know what is at the bottom and what is on top. So ROI has the total cost or the total initial investment at the bottom. So that is the base. So compared to the total initial investment, so what is the total return? So the total return is the summation of the all of the net benefits. As I said on the previous slide, yearly net benefits is BI minus CI. So if you're summing up all of the BI minus CI and you divide that by the initial investment, and you get a percentage with the return on investment. So of course, return on investment has to be positive, otherwise you're losing money on this project. That it makes no sense. And and return on investment is a number that you want to see as large as possible, because if you get a higher level of return, of course it's better. So as my previous example shows, if the total net benefit is 1 million, that doesn't really give you any confidence in terms of the return or in terms of project payoff, unless you know the total initial investment. So if the initial investment is $10 million, and your return or your total net benefits is $1 million, then the ROI is 10%. If, however, your initial investment is $10 billion, and then you're comparing that to the $1 million of net benefits, then you're looking at less than 1% of the return, or less than 0.1% of the return. That is really low. So that's why ROI is a really good number. It's a very easy number to calculate, as you can see, but it's a pretty good number to show your project payoff. I would highly recommend that you go through this carefully if you don't understand how to calculate ROI, and at the very least, you should include ROI in your business case. I'll just briefly mention the next few measures. It's completely up to you whether you want to use them or not. Payback period is the year when, or is the number of period that it takes for the net for break even. So initially you are going to spend money without getting any benefits, because before the project is set up, before the system is set up, of course you're not getting any benefits. So there's an initial cost, and then you're accruing the benefits. So until the benefits outweigh the cost, and so the time when you say that initially the benefits outweigh the cumulative cost, and that is the payback period. So basically you just sum up the net benefits year by year until you find that, okay, so by this year the cumulative net benefits becomes positive, so that is the payback period. So you can imagine that the payback period has to be less than the system lifetime, because if the project doesn't pay back within the system lifetime, then it's certainly not worth doing. And the payback period should be the shorter the payback period, the better, because if you can break even on this project earlier, then it's of course better. The next financial measure is net present value. So net present value is essentially the same as the total net benefits, except that we introduce the uh, uh, the discount mechanism to take into account the time value of money and uncertainty over time. For those of you who are taking finance, you probably know NPV very well, because that's what you have to calculate pretty much in everything. If you're not familiar with NPV, if you haven't taken finance before, it's okay to stay with ROI. But if you understand this discounting mechanism, then you're encouraged to do that. Of course, NPV is an absolute value, so NPV is a dollar amount. So this is not a ratio, and in order to show the project payoff, NPV is as large as the larger the NPV, the better. Finally, the most universally accepted measure for project payoff is IRR, internal rate of return. This is a difficult concept for those of you who haven't taken finance, but it's a critical number to use when you're examining the viability of a project. And you use the same setup. You just assuming you just put in the IRR as an unknown variable into the NPV calculation and set that equation to zero and solve for it. For the interpretation of IRR, just, you should go back to the finance class, or you learn a lot about that when you take the finance class. But if you know how to use IRR, and there's an IRR function in Excel that you can use. So it's really not that hard to calculate. You just have to understand the concept of it. But if you understand the concept and you know how to calculate it, I'll highly encourage you to use IRR. It's a better, or it's a more sophisticated, or it's a more convincing measure than ROI, than return on investment. But if you don't understand this, then it's okay to stay with return on investment. But of course, IRR should be greater than, it should be large. And if you're using some kind of discount mechanism, then IRR has to be larger than the hurdle rate. And the larger the IRR, the better. So after seeing the different financial analyses, then some of you who are not quantitative driven, or some of you just don't like numbers, or say, God, can I just write everything qualitatively and describe what the system is about, and showing that people will benefit from this, and then not getting into all the numbers, all the financial analysis. Well, I keep emphasizing that you need to have a financial analysis, and at the very least, you have to have the table set up, and then you have to show the table. You have to have a return on investment, ROI. But if is financial analysis always needed? Well, actually, the answer to that question is no. You don't always need the financial analysis. If the investments are simply necessity, then you don't have to analyze it, right? So let's say that you're working with Walmart. You're a small vendor. You sell to Walmart. And Walmart requires you to buy to get their retail link system. It will cost a certain amount of money to set up. It will cost training. It will cost you will cost the licensing fee and all that, and then you will have to use it, and that will cost you time and effort. So of course there's a bunch of costs associated with it, but you have to write a business case to show whether the retailing will pay off or not. Well, the if you want to sell to Walmart and you don't have realtor link, then it doesn't work. So that is the open and shut case. So there's no reason to provide any analysis. So actually, if this is your reason not to provide a financial analysis, I would argue that that's probably cases where you don't even have to write a business case, because you don't have to prove that this is something you need to show that's worth doing. Well, sometimes the investments have little values of its own, so it's hard to quantify by itself. Sometimes the benefits are totally intangible or strategic. That's completely possible, but as I talked about it earlier, very few cases are like that. And usually those are the cases those are the systems or the projects initiated by senior managers, not by somebody who's identified a business issue and tried to resolve them. So in general, the the quantitative costs and benefits, and also a good financial analysis, they are a necessary part of a business case. So by default, you have to do those things. If you don't do those things, if you don't have the numbers, if you don't have the dollar amount for costs, if you don't have the dollar amount for benefits, and you don't have a good financial analysis, at least with the return on investment, then you have to explain why. If you don't explain why in a satisfactory fashion, then it will cost you the approval, because people will not approve it in real world. And in this course setting, when you write your final paper, and if you're not doing a good financial analysis with a good quantitative costs and benefits, that will cost you in grades. It's just that simple.